Hi, Mushanja.
Hello.
Thanks for taking the time to, share your thoughts and experiences and concepts with us. Excited to engage some of these ideas with you and your practices. I'm going to hand over to Leanne to crack us on.
Hi. Okay, so maybe you can start for us and for the viewers who will watch this. Tell us a bit about where you live and work. Introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world watching this. I am Nashilongwe Shipwe Mshanja. You can just say Nashi for short. I'm an artist, trained in theater, working mostly in performance. So through my practice of theater making, performance art, performing music, I work at the University of Namibia's main campus at the Performing Arts Department, where I teach courses in acting and performance, writing, as well as theater pedagogy. And that's Windhoek, which is the capital city of Namibia. I think that's a bit of an introduction.
Fantastic, thank you. So can we jump straight in and ask you to describe some more for us your approach to practice as research? What does this mean to you? What does it open up for you?
Practice as research, or what we generally refer to as PAR, or in other terms, artistic research, creative research. You might even come across some terms that are more specific, like practice-based, practice-led, performance-based research, performance-led research, which all really amount to the same thing, which is the using and the application and the engagement with practice, right? Artistic practice, to be in particular, when we're speaking about this method. The making of art, the making of performance, focusing mostly on the process and the product, right? The process of making the work and the product, which is the final outcome of making the work, as the site of research, as the object of analysis, right? So I encountered this work through my postgrad studies in performance studies, I think by the masters, where I began to experiment with it. And it's largely situated in, and it can be defined along the lines of, number one, creating, working through, developing some kind of practice, or making work as the research. It might mean different things, and it means different things to different research departments. So for example, on the one hand, it might just mean only creating work, and the work in itself is the research. And by that, I mean creating a body of work, making an exhibition, performing a play, and in some cases, there is the body of work that's created and a written thing next to it, which is a mini thesis or a research report of some sort, a dissertation. So for me, what makes it such a very powerful and relevant approach to doing research, knowing research's dirty history in the academy, is that it does not only center practice, but it's also very much about situated knowledges, it often provides an opportunity to work with knowledges that are not always put on the front in the academies. So situated knowledges, epistemologies, conceptual work of things that are likely not to be studied. And because it's very centered in the practice, it's a very unique creature. It's not so much about validity and reliability, for example, which is very important in social sciences research or educational research. It's more about where the process takes you, where the practice takes you. It's about experimentation. And as such, it comes out of a very big socially engaged, social justice, approaches or epistemologies or commitments, social. It's about analysis, and it's about reflection, and it's about engagement. So for me, PAR is not just a thing that's centering practice, but rather goes beyond practice. Practice becomes the vehicle through which we can theorize, but also it's very much about, it's dialogic. It's very much about the practice and the theory and the reflection. In other words, praxis is at the center of PAR. That's what it means to me. It's a political project. It's not just us doing research for the sake of doing research. It's deeply socially engaged and has commitments to transformation, whatever that might mean.
Thanks, Bushanja. I'm gonna come back to the third question and go to the fourth one, because I think it's maybe gonna link here. But I was interested in what you were speaking about as research's dirty history. And then I was thinking about how you have linked your work around independent arts organizing, and for example, Odalate Ngateke Festival, through the approach of practice as research. So I was basically going to ask, maybe what do you mean by, one, what do you mean by the researcher's dirty history? Two, maybe what was this festival, Odalate Ngateke, that you've put on? And yeah, how has that expanded your concept of research, and how has practice as research kind of helped you enter that space, or gain a new approach to that work?
So by saying research is dirty, I'm borrowing and I'm referencing from Sabelo Ndlovu-Gacheni, decolonial theorist, who has this wonderful text. I think it's an article about the dirty roots of research, the unhygienic nature of research. And he's thinking about where research comes from, how it becomes a thing in the academy. If you think, for example, Namibia and South Africa have a very long shared history of collections of human remains, right?
Sure.
Which was part of colonial project, these pseudo-scientific practices that have manifested in history throughout colonialism and even after colonialism, of where scientists did unethical things and used that to justify the colonial process. So in Namibia and South Africa, for example, where grave robberies, scientists and missionaries and explorers, whatever, were all many of them were involved in grave robberies, or collecting human remains to do this funny pseudoscientific racial sciences That is the dirty nature of research, anthropology, and many, many, many disciplines. Ethnology at the center. That's the dirt we are talking about. That dirt did not end because we are now in the decolonial turn. It did not end because we are now new universities with a global whatever. They continue in subtle and sometimes very harsh ways. So that's what we're referring to, that when we're doing research, we are immediately implicated in this dirt, this dirty history of research. And although practice as research, artistic research, presents itself and comes out of a socially conscious, a kind of social committed to change, it is not exempted from this research. Although it offers new approaches or different approaches of doing research, it is not exempted from the dirt. Because if you think about performance ethnography, for example, which is a method within artistic research, or autoethnography, which might sound like turning the gaze from this way to this way, can still be very, very caught up in all kinds of extractivism, because it really still relies on collecting of data. So, but I think what practice as research does is that it just offers perhaps a different way of collaborating and doing research. One that is situated in developing a practice that is progressive. So for example, in Odalatena Iteke was a response. It was part of my PhD project. And the practice here was to curate / to organize, right? I'm an organizer in the community where I come from, but to develop works of art, workshops of radical histories, for example, in a city where these things happen to be happening more in one side of the city, which is the center of the city, and to make clear spaces for artists to engage in a more public way, to take art out of the theaters and the galleries, to put it on the street, on murals, at schools, at homes, going to homes to listen to historians speaking about forced removals in the city. That's what Odalatena Iteke was, and coming from the phrase Odalatena Iteke as a slogan used by workers protesting in the very same geography of Katutura in the 1972, 1973, saying the fence must break. So this idea of breaking the fence, breaking the walls, breaking the things that divide us. So it was inherent, it's how I used my research space to organize, instead of just coming to collect data and writing a thing. But there is some kind of practice of organizing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very privileged to come to and contribute to that festival. I mean, it remains one of the highlights, I guess. Yeah, it was really. We did an African history workshop about the history of Ottilie Abrams, a liberation figure from South Africa and Namibia. Well, from Namibia, spent some time in South Africa. So it's interesting to think about it, how broad your notion of practices research kind of can take you. I was going to ask also about one of the concepts you used, particularly in your dissertation, of Odano. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it exactly right, but I wanted to ask what has it meant historically, and how have you used it to make an intervention politically in the academic world that you've been in?
Yes, my thesis was based on Odano, a Namibian concept, or Shiwambo concept. So I'm very interested in concepts and what concepts can do, and how concepts sometimes take us out of the traditional Western idea of theory, and how concepts can become a way of creating grounded theory. And Odano means play. It means play, it means performance, it means to do, it means play, it means performativity. It means all these things. So it's a broad container. It's a broad, and I chose it because I was frustrated at the Namibian cultural official landscape. And I felt that there was so much out in the periphery, on the margins, in the cracks of the archives, where artists were creating cultural work that was outside of the official zone. And I decided I will do a whole PhD on Odano, which meant bringing together a variety of objects of analysis, unrelated objects, to demonstrate the expansive nature, the archival nature of this concept, and the social movement nature of this concept. So I was interested in, what does Odano mobilize? What does it do? So from thinking through how play and performance are depicted in rock art from central Namibia, to organizing Odalatenaiteke, in other words, organizing through play, or organizing plays of sorts in public spaces, to reading the work of a feminist queer singer who sang during apartheid, Nangilina Shima, who I positioned as a radical, and her music was what would be traditionally referred to as Odano. So this play, traditional music, to reading performance art in different parts of the city, to writing about my own performance of working with archives, sound archives, photography archives in an ethnological museum in Hamburg. I can't even remember everything, to writing about jazz during apartheid in Namibia. These are different chapters that brought to different experiments, sets of objects that I brought together to demonstrate the broad, the expansive, and most importantly, the undisciplined nature of Odano. The idea was to show that Odano is so undisciplined, and that disciplinarity was not enough to understand if we're going to study this concept. If we only looked at it through the lens of drama, it wasn't going to be enough. I mean, at some point, the one chapter also includes radical protests, feminist protests during the pandemic against SGBV, the Shut It All Down movement, that used performance techniques such as toy, twerking, all these very undisciplined tendencies to describe this undisciplined concept, and the idea was to also, because I was playing as I was writing and I was experimenting and playing, is to also use the Odano itself, not just as the object of analysis, but also as the method. So it's both method, it's also the thing that we do, to really show that there's so much, and that became very difficult for the university to contain. So there was lots of fighting, and even the examiners said, "Shoo, I can see there was lots of deliberation. But this is what the potential of practice as research is, that it allows us to challenge the hegemonic approaches to research. And what I find, that I was at University of Cape Town, which is very big and progressive, and many scholars write about practice as research. And now I'm at a much smaller drama department where I'm teaching. And in both universities, we're struggling with creative research, whether it's to get proposals through, whether it's to fight for what is considered to be legitimate knowledge. And things like Odano are slippery, they are leaky. You think you've got it, and then there's something else, you know. But also for things like promotions, and I mean, promotions is not the most important thing, but recently at the university we had struggles with how to count creative. The policy says we accept creative research as publication, but then to count it, the university struggled. And so there's a lot of work we still have to do in our universities, this part of the world, for example, to say that actually practice as research is what we should be encouraging in all disciplines. It doesn't just mean make art or perform. It can really mean teach. It can mean, you know, it's creating research that is not separate from that which we practice. It's blurring those lines between theory and practice, between community engagement and research and teaching. It's practice tends to do that. So Odano is something that's situated in particular contexts. Or of course, I was writing it from a Namibian perspective, and that's why I was going across. The traditional way would have been to study it in the Oshiwambo context. In fact, one of the examiners say, "Why didn't you go to the village and look for the history of Odano?" I said, "No, I wanted to cross ethnic. I wanted to cross disciplines. I wanted to cross time periods. I wanted to be too much, just to challenge, not just also challenge the university but to really do justice to the concept."
That's beautiful. I mean, what you describe is really the move against a form of containment that starts, as you remind us, with dirty research, dirty methods, lazy forms of theorization and thinking, actually, and how to fit into that while also changing it is a challenge that I think starts at when one's a student, but continues as one stays involved in the university as an institution. Those challenges are deep. So when you talk about the disciplining effect, the segregating and bounding off of things as if that kind of clarity means something better about the world or knowledge, and we actually realize that that's actually useful in a much more limited idea of what the world is and what reality is. So it often can't, as in the university and the limited knowledge project that the colonial institution has suggested and that we are inheriting and changing, it actually can't deal with the complexity and the slipperiness, as you say. And in particular, what I'm so inspired by in your research and your work is the insistence on play, is the insistence on creativity, is the insistence on pleasure and joy in really being with and in the world in ways that I think sometimes the research project, if not well framed and thought about, can do. So thank you so much for that reflection. I wanted to ask you, there is this tradition of research called, social justice or socially engaged research or engaged research itself. Do you see what you've just described as part of that tradition, adding to it, extending it? And then, of course, the question we all grapple with, how does this relate to the project of decolonization, which was so strongly put back on the table in the South African context, at least in 2015 through the student movement, but that has been a question on the continent for a long time.
Yeah. I do think it is, what I do is socially engaged. I think it's interested in the decolonial, and primarily because I do come from those traditions. I do come from, I'm part of a group of scholars here and activists. We have a Namibian Journal of Social Justice, and perhaps the idea of social justice, this is the language we're also getting from senior academics and senior activists. There's this language of equality and social justice. For me, I don't see this socially engaged social justice as necessarily different from decolonial, for example. It's if you listen very carefully, it's all concerned with the same thing. I do come from the decolonial movement. I followed Fees Must Fall, although I wasn't there physically. I was still a student at Wits University, but I was in Namibia finishing up my research. I resonated deeply with the decolonial question and the question of free education. And I've loved seeing the things that came out of that, the kind of work, the kind of research, teaching practices that came out of that. But at the same time, I'm also very wary and very attentive to the fact that these have also become fashionable labels for funding. People can be overtly homophobic and sexist and still call themselves decolonial. And we're seeing it. You'll find books that are written by, even here at our university, where sometimes people call themselves decolonial, but they're the ones who sit and gatekeep research and make it miserable for our students. So for me, like I've learned from you, my comrades, it's the doing part. And that's what practices research is. That's what praxis is. It's the doing. Are you just theorizing, or are you embodying? Are you living those values, actively organizing those, there was once a workshop with feminists, and they were asked to bring the facilitator said, bring all your, it was academics, professors, bring all your house helps to the workshop. And some actively refused. Some refused to bring their domestic workers to the workshop. For many reasons, of course, but this is the test. Is it just theory, which sounds amazing, which sounds delicious, which we love as academics, or is it something you are actively committed to? And by organizing or playing or doing, I don't necessarily mean being hyper visible, but just in your daily life. Is this something, is this a thing that you embody? So for me, the terminology is one thing, the naming is one thing, but the doing is the other thing. And this is what I'm always interested in. If you come to me and you say, this is decolonial research, I want to know, where is the decolonial happening? Where is it happening? Yeah, and maybe it's not also a must for everybody to be a practice as a research person. Maybe that might sound like biting off too much, to be expected to write a thing, but you must also somehow do. I mean, the writing itself is already a doing of sorts. But this is why I'm saying that as an academic, as a researcher, as a student, you are not just an academic. You also are a human being, part of a society, part of a community, and that's where the other doing can happen.
Fine, we'll combine the last two questions. Okay. Thanks, Mushanja. Yeah, I think we just want to have one more question. Well, I'm going to combine two questions, if that's okay. But wanted to ask if you think in relation to your work and these concepts and practices that we've been discussing, if you feel there's anything that we've discussed or that we've missed potentially in our questions that you think is very important to thinking through this this stuff. And secondly, and we've touched on some of this, particularly in your last answer around, I'll quote you on it. It's the doing part, you know. I mean, you've mentioned this, and kind of how you think about progressive work, and it's in the practice of doing and organizing. But the question is, what do you think of the work? What do you think the work of a postgraduate student is in relation to the major social and political questions of the world? So yeah, those two questions. If you think there's anything we've missed, and what do you think the work of postgraduate students in the particular moment that we are in the world is?
I can't really think of anything additional that I want to add that we might have missed now, but I will keep that at the back of my head. But what is the work of a postgraduate student in the context of all of this? That's a bit, it's challenging to answer. And I wonder if I will sound like a typical supervisor. It's interesting, by the way, how one day you are a student and the next day you are the one gatekeeping.
or throwing the gates open.
Or throwing the gates open.
Breaking the fence down.
I think the role of I will say this. I think the role of a postgraduate student is to have fun with their studies, is to enjoy and to be as playful as possible. Because what happens often in postgrad studies is that the fun gets taken out by all these bureaucratic, institutional what's. So it's very important that the project that you create, the course that you choose to do, and the journey that you take becomes yours. And that there is joy and that there is, life in it. It mustn't feel dead. I think that's a primary responsibility before I even think of other. There must be a sense of ownership and agency, as we like to say about engagement of any sorts. I think if we look at the world in the way it's changing in this fascist, hyper-racialized, and it's just not getting better, and genocide left, right, and center, I think students must have a heightened, socially engaged practice of some sort. And here I'm going back to doing. There must be some kind of, maybe let me say, commitment. But I've always struggled with this because many people always say, some people will always say that, yeah, it's not my job to be decolonial. It's not my job to be socially engaged. I'm not here for that. And just because you don't see me theorizing or practicing any of that doesn't mean, so I don't want to prescribe, but I just want to say that looking at the way the world is turning out, looking at the way our continent is turning out, the challenges we are facing, I don't think we have the luxury of choosing. There's no luxury of choosing whether you are into equality and social justice or not. Never mind even the selective choosing. But I'm just saying, my word is that people must be engaged in one way or the other, in the smallest or biggest ways, as opposed to leaving that up to chance. So I do think, and I do agree that students have a responsibility, or let me say, as Africans, let me speak from that, because that's always easier to say. We have a responsibility to building our societies, to bringing healing, and to bringing change, transformation. And we can only do that, I think, if we commit ourselves to some kind of socially engaged, social justice project. I don't know if there's any other option. I mean, I don't know if there's anything better than this that we've just discussed now, having that commitment. And I know for some it's an easy choice, but I'm just thinking that the community I come from, the history I come from, my context, I don't have the luxury of choosing whether I should be a social justice activist or not. I was born in all of that, and often that's what sets the tone. For some people, they can't relate because they don't have the experience of colonization. But then again, what does that mean in a global world like today? So there's no luxury. We have to join the revolution because there's no time to waste.
Thank you. We've really enjoyed this time, and we're sure that everyone who watches will leave the viewing with some important and difficult provocations and suggestions. So,
yeah, thanks, Prashanjya. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.